Hey everyone, I'm Keith Lee, CEO of Counterplay Games and Game Director on Godfall. Thanks for joining us today. I want to personally welcome everyone to our Godfall celebration. We can't wait for you to get your hands on Godfall when it launches on the PlayStation 5 and on the Epic Games Store this November 12th. That's when the real fun begins. Before that though, we're proud to share with you today the world premiere of Godfall's launch trailer.
He turned us against each other. Brother against brother. Macros tried to kill me. He failed. His reign ends with me.
You can count on us. You are strong, Orin, but not strong enough. You need to craft better weapons.
Go on, light the forge.
All of you are unworthy of my master's new world.
When you defeat each of his lieutenants, their strength will become your own.
Time for your madness to end, brother. I was never just your brother. I am your god. I'm ready.
I hope you enjoyed what you just saw, and that you're ready to fight through the challenges and rewards as you save the world of Aperion. Our passionate team here at Counterplay Games is so thankful for all the support and encouragement we've already received. We've been working tirelessly to create a beautiful world for you to explore, as well as creating an engaging experience filled with lots of combat and of course, loot to collect. Now, I want to turn things over to my teammate here at Counterplay Games, Dick Hain. Dick is our senior technical producer and has been at the forefront of making Godfall a reality.
Thanks, Keith. I can't believe we're just 1 week away from the launch of Godfall, and I know everybody watching wants to see more of the game, so be sure to stay tuned, because we've got a really good chunk of gameplay coming up, all captured on the PS5. First, I'm going to walk you through setting your loadout in the Sanctum, which is the player's home base. After that, we're immediately going to put that loadout to the test, jumping into the first mission in the Water Realm, where we're going to face a beast, Thraex. After that, Keith and I are going to sit down with Erix and My Name is Bife. We're going to answer their questions about what they saw in the gameplay capture, touch a little bit more on lore, and I'll even share with you what my favorite build is in Godfall. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to our second gameplay walkthrough. And I'm excited to show you more of the game today on behalf of everyone at Counterplay Games. Today, we'll take a closer look at the Seventh Sanctum, your home base in Aperion, and then dive into a pretty challenging boss fight against Thraex. As we prepare for that fight, we'll also explore our build and inventory system, which we know many of you have been asking to see more of. In the 7th Sanctum, you're totally safe to practice your moves with the training construct. You can swap Valor plates, choose your loadout, upgrade loot at the Forge, and organize your party for co-op. For this fight, we're going to unlock Vertigo.
The Valor Plate of Wisdom is a favorite of artists and philosophers.
Her Valor Plate symbolizes wisdom and allows us to supercharge our shock damage, rewarding electrifying build paths that deal damage over time. Now that we're all suited up, let's choose our loadout. This screen helps you understand your build at a glance. On the far right, you can see your overall stats and primary attributes. Might tracks your standard attack damage, Spirit increases your ability damage, and Vitality represents your overall health. You can also see your crit chance and damage, as well as the chance to proccing elemental effects. Digging into the gear, you can see there are 8 slots. 2 weapons, 1 charm, 1 amulet, 2 rings, 1 lifestone, and a banner. All of them help modify and amplify key stats, but today we'll be focusing on weapons, lifestones, and banners. Weapons are a key part of Godfall and change up your playstyle, moveset, and damage type. You can quickly swap between any 2 weapons and equip new ones on the fly if you find something great in the field. When choosing weapons, you can see their detailed stats, special effects, and a close-up look of the weapon itself. Today, we'll take Retribution, a 2-handed greatsword to carve through mobs, and Stormflayers, a set of dual blades for single-target DPS. Lifestones restore health, allowing you to keep fighting. They can also trigger powerful effects, giving you the edge in tough combat. Banners are AoE buffs that affect you and your co-op allies. These effects stack with other banners your allies drop, allowing your team to choose a moment to truly dominate the battle. Now that our build's sorted, let's check out the holo map where we choose our missions. Today we'll be heading into the Water Realm. The Thraex fight is at the end of this story mission, which we won't spoil for you today. So just inside here is the Thraex. The Thraex are proto-dragons that are extremely territorial, making them excellent guardians.
A fire creature in the Water Realm. It must be one of their prisoners. I'll set it free.
Kind of like a fire-breathing German Shepherd. This fight is genuinely challenging and will require every tool in your arsenal. Banner up, throw on Archon Fury, and lay into the beast while dancing around its attacks. The most dangerous place to be is right in front of it. Use side dodges to get a good angle of attack and sneak in a few strikes before the Thraex counters. When it fires its laser, make sure you slide beneath the laser if you're cool, or just throw your shield up if you're not. Managing your cooldowns, like your shield throw and weapon special abilities, is key. Handle all of this, and you'll handle Thraex as well. That's some loot. And that's Thrax. In the full game, you can embark on an entire campaign as well as side quests called hunts that provide even more challenging versions of this boss and many others. Once you're through, endgame challenges await in the Tower of Trials.
On to Lunara.
With the materials we've collected, we can craft a new Valor Plate. This is Typhon, one of the 12 Valor Plates in Godfall.
The armor of chaos was a favorite among Valorians who hunted monsters.
We hope you enjoyed this dive into Godfall's build system and the first boss fight in the Water Realm. We can't wait for you to experience every mission, realm, Valor Plate, and weapon we have in store for you and your friends on PS5 and PC on November 12th. And if you pre-order today, you'll earn some exclusive loot as well. Make sure to stick around for a Q&A about Godfall. And from all of us at Counterplay, thank you so much, and we'll see you at launch.
Hey everybody, thank you very much for watching the awesome boss fight walkthrough. Of course, Godfall running on PS5 looks incredible, and welcome to the round table because we're going to be answering some questions and speaking to a few very special guests. I am very kindly joined by CEO of Counterplay Games, Keith Lee.
Hey, it's really great to meet you guys. Can't wait to chat here.
I'm also joined by senior technical producer, Dick Hain.
Good to see you again, Eric's really excited for this.
Good to see you, man. I'm ready to chat. And of course, also joined by the legendary Lord Daddy himself, Mr. My Name is Bife. How you doing, buddy?
Doing good. I still hate that name's caught on, but Lord Daddy.
Oh, it's a great name.
It's stuck like glue. It's stuck like glue.
Mm-hmm. It is a legendary name, and of course you've got your lore series going right now, which is going to be incredibly exciting. We'll touch on that a little bit later. But of course today there are plenty of community questions. Lots of people are incredibly excited for the game, myself included, and we still want to know a few things. So why don't we kick off some questions, try and get some answers.
So obviously that was a fantastic boss fight that we saw there, and this was all set in the Water Realm, and there's clearly some context to the Tormentor's Asylum mission, which we see playing here. So can you tell us a little bit more of the backstory about this? Tell us a little bit more about the Water Realm in particular, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to give a little bit of context to this moment and what it means to the player in the context of the campaign of Godfall. So earlier in the campaign, Orin's essentially decides to team up with the Sanctum to take down Macros. And there's this gorgeous cinematic. It's one of my favorite cinematics in the entire game. You'll know it when you see it, where the Seventh Sanctum gives Orin an overview of all of Macros' lieutenants and kind of gives this overview as to how they guard the various elemental realms and how they're extracting magical energy so Macros can complete the rites of ascension and essentially become a god. And Orin rightfully thinks to himself, okay, well, I gotta take these lieutenants down and stop that. So the context for Tormentor's Asylum is the player just finished the Earth Realm, right? They took down the Vargals, they stopped that part of Macros' plan, and now they're ascending through the Central Tower to the Water Realm. And what was so exciting about this moment for us as we were building it was just how stark of a contrast the Water Realm was from the Earth Realm and the Sunforge, which come before it. It's really the first time the player gets to experience, or I think understand how much contrast and how much variety there's going to be in Godfall environments, because it's just completely different. Whereas the Earth Realm is outside, it's bright, it's green, brown, colorful. The Water Realm is a completely different mood. A kind of a comparison that I like to use is it feels like you're in a hostile aquarium, and that's just like a slight bias for me because I love aquariums. They're like, it's probably like my number 2 favorite hobby behind gaming. I just love going to aquariums, and the Water Realm literally feels like that. As you look around the environment, as you see in the video, there are just these gorgeous shots that gives you a sense of scope and what the Central Tower looks like, and it just sets a mysterious yet gloomy mood. And then when you stop looking around you and your surroundings and you engage with the enemies, you realize that there's kind of a threat around every corner. So despite all this beauty and soothingness around you, there's always this looming threat that lingers, and that you, as a player, you always kind of feel that. And I just love the mood that these various elements combine, and Auron's essentially entering the water realm to ultimately take down Lunara. That's kind of like the lieutenant that's guarding the water realm for Macros, and Tormentor's Asylum is how Auron starts the journey to taking down Lunara.
And in the process of all that, needless to say, they're going to meet the Abyssians who are inhabiting the water realm, and that sense of hostility that the player is going to feel when they enter is very appropriate. Because, of course, the Abyssians themselves, what with the 1C doctrine and the entire idea behind their civilization being supremacy and their ability to dominate and their right to dominate, it makes a lot of sense that you step into this totally new world, stunned by its beauty, and then immediately you feel like you're under attack.
Yeah, the Abyssian were really fun to introduce because they're completely different than the Vargal, which is the tribe that guards the Earth Realm and that you know well. So getting an opportunity to, like you said, introduce that faction and start to understand how they're different than the Vargals, both in the way they behave and the way that they battle, as developers, it was just an exciting experience for us to craft.
From everything I've seen so far, like in that area, I think we spoke about this in like the last time we had a chat, but that area just looks, I feel like it shows the game so well as well. Like, the game looks visually very impressive, but then step into the water realm and those colors start dropping, and it's like, this looks clean. So
it's my favorite, man. I had such a hard time focusing on work when we were crafting the water realm. I became more of a cheerleader, honestly. Like, I was like the equivalent of running around the office with pom-poms and just like, level design, everything you're doing is amazing, environment, I just was obsessed with the water realm from the moment that we started to concept it. So this one's special to me, absolutely.
Kind of brings me nicely onto sort of the next question, which is, everyone wants to know about loot, right? We've seen some stuff recently. We got kind of a look at like menus and loot screen, which looks fantastic, but let's just say, like, we're playing together as a squad, we're kind of rolling through. If we defeat the boss like we saw, and we saw the kind of loot dropping down, which looks cool, I love, like, whenever you have those loot showers, it's like a really kind of awesome moment. How does loot work? Like, are we sharing the loot? Is it like personal loot? Can you kind of speak about how that system works?
Yeah, for sure. So loot in Godfall is instance per player, so you never have to worry about your one notorious friend that's the loot hog. So you should be good. All instance.
Somehow that actually
surprising no one.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me that much, actually.
I'm sorry. I used to be that guy that would just like be the rogue player who would go invisible and then just run to the chests.
But you're reformed now. You're reformed now. Now you share.
I'm reformed. Okay. I'm a good guy now. I'm a tank. I defend my friends first. I take the front line, but I'm also strategically very close to the loot when it drops.
Smart man.
But that's cool. Instant loot is great, honestly. Yeah, especially if you're jumping online, because obviously you can play with other people and whatnot. If you're playing with people you don't necessarily know, I think instance is definitely the way to go.
So, outside of the amazing boss fights that we've seen, are there any other things that we can potentially expect to encounter during these story missions? Or just generally when we're out in the world of Godfall?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there are various factions, and we've gone over this idea at a high level, right? That there is almost like a guardian faction per realm, right? So, going back to what we were just talking about, the Vargal, for example, are patrolling the Earth Realm. The Abyssian are patrolling the Water Realm. But there are these, there are other factions in the game, such as the Crimson Wind or the Black Tide Mercenaries, that have the ability, similar to Auron, to travel between the realms. So, as far as other things that you can encounter or expect to encounter, what was really fun for us as we were developing these encounters and thinking, how can we continue to keep these fresh and versatile and keep the player, what's the next challenge going to be? What's the next challenge I have to overcome? It was really exciting for us to really look at the cast of characters that we had, and we started with, for example, if we're looking at the Water Realm, we start with the Abyssian, and we look at the hierarchy of the Abyssian, and we think, how can we put these pieces together to create interesting encounters, interesting moments for the player? And there was a lot to play with there just by itself. But then you start thinking about, well, what happens when the Black Tide Mercenaries are involved in the Water Realm? Are they hostile towards the Abyssian? Are they friendly towards the Abyssian? How do they work together? How do they work against each other? And then, as you answer these questions, the overarching question is, how does the player interact with those moments and those encounters? And I think that's what kind of allows the Water Realm to feel multi-layered, because the player is constantly being kept on the edge of their seat with what's going to come next. And we see it in the video that we just watched, accumulating to the boss fight with Thraex, a beast that almost feels as though it was taken out of place and put into the water realm by some outside force. We wanted to create interesting moments that would take the player off guard like that.
Yeah, there are also 5 defined tribes in Godfall. So there's the Vargul, there's the Abyssians, the Nyack, the Black Tide Mercenaries, as well as the Crimson Wind. You will also encounter corrupted Valorians, such as Macros. There are beasts, as well as constructs in the game. And across the board, there are over 70 unique enemies in Godfall. So that doesn't even account for elites or endgame variants. So we really hung our hat on building out a lot of really great enemies and focusing on enemy variety. So there's going to be a lot that you'll get to encounter in the story missions.
That's really cool to hear, because often, you kind of, if you play sort of similar games like this, you kind of tend to sort of see a lot of familiar enemy types. So to hear there's like so many is going to be really, really cool. In fact, one thing to kind of touch on just quickly is sort of when we think about our characters, kind of progressing them out even sort of further. We've seen in one of the more recent things sort of some of the skill tree stuff, and you sort of mentioned that you don't necessarily expect to max out the skill tree by the time you get to the end of the game. However, conversely, like what max level are we looking to achieve? And also, what is there stuff we can do post-campaign where we can look to unlock even more skill points so we potentially can max out the tree?
So the max level in Godfall is 50. So that's the max level cap. And every time you level up in the game, you will earn 1 skill point. And you're right, after you finish all the story missions, you will not be able to completely fill out your skill grid. But you will be able to acquire additional skill points as you complete other activities throughout your journey. And as you get to the end game and you start to enter into a lot of the end game loops, there will be ways for you to continue to acquire more skill points so that you can fill out and continue to fill out your grid, which also means that you can start to explore more complex builds in the end game.
Ooh, okay, that sounds awesome. Does that mean it would, technically speaking, be possible to? Because I noticed on the skill grid, obviously, all the different skill icons have multiple nodes, so you obviously need to invest into those. Would there ever be a point where we could basically just max out everything, or is there always going to be like a finite point?
No, yeah, so there will be a finite point. To completely max out the skill grid, if I remember the number off the top of my head correctly, I believe you would need 125 skill points. So the idea here is that the player will be, quote unquote, forced to make a choice with their build path. We don't want to necessarily give you everything that would kind of overwhelm and bloat the build, honestly. So we want there to be some decision making there. That being said, something that I did want to kind of emphasize with the skill grid, and we mentioned this in a previous interview, but I just want to make sure that everyone's really clear on this, is we make respecking as simple as possible. We don't want players to get caught up in choice paralysis. You're going to be switching between valor plates, switching between weapons, and as your build is evolving, as you naturally progress throughout the game, you might want to experiment. So it's very easy to wipe your skill grid, start from scratch, get all of your skill points refunded, and build the thing back up. And we wanted, again, going back to this idea of the Tinkerer's dream, we really wanted to give players that flexibility.
And also the other key point is that the skill grid is shared across all of your valor plates. You have a single skill grid on your player, and that makes it a lot easier for you to be able to swap between valor plates to adjust your skill points. They're not associated with a specific valor plate.
That I love so much, because the amount of games where you're like, I want to try this different class, but I know I'm gonna have to grind for another bajillion hours. Thank you for doing that. That is I'm so happy about that.
We got you, Eric's.
Yeah, not to mention it means that, let's say you're a Typhon player, but you really love suddenly this thing that you're doing with another valor plate. Maybe you've tried Illumina for the first time. Yeah, you could absolutely jump in and just do whatever you wanted with that and experiment with a powerful new playstyle. Speaking of powerful playstyles, obviously that's the kind of stuff you're going to need to use when you get to the end game. And after you've done the main campaign, presumably you beat the final boss, which is Macross, although I'm not going to ask you guys to commit to an answer on that one yet. You got a certain flow to the end game. There are going to be activities, and obviously going to have loot rewarded from those. What kind of loot should I be chasing in the end game? What are the kind of special pieces of gear that I'm going to want to get? What's my objective after the campaign is done as far as expanding my arsenal of weapons?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we knew it was critical for us to nail the endgame loop, because this is what's probably most important, or one of the most important things to our most dedicated players, right? So we took this serious, and we really kind of put our heads together and was like, okay, how can we create a compelling and engaging endgame experience? So like you highlighted, the first thing the player is going to do is defeat Macros, right? And the second that happens and you return to your sanctum, the first thing the player is going to be introduced with is this concept of Dreamstone mode, which we went over in a previous interview. But at a high level, the idea behind Dreamstone is it's an alternative game mode. The player interacts with it on their holo map, and the idea are Dreamstones are born from Cosmera's dreams. So it gives the player the opportunity to essentially explore alternate and ideal realities from Cosmera's mind, and this will allow them to face old adversaries, old bosses that have been enhanced and have become more powerful, essentially. And the way that Dreamstones work, again, keeping it at a relatively high level, is you unlock the first Dreamstone when you first beat the game. There are 18 Dreamstones in total, so there's quite a bit of content there to chew through. And Dreamstones are meant to be replayable. If you want to kind of wrap your mind around it, we were trying to create like a roguelike mini game within Godfall, and that's really what Dreamstones are. Yeah. So I'll try to keep this at a high level, but I really love the Dreamstone mode, so I apologize if I go a little off the rails. I'll try to keep this concentrated. But the idea is, right, let's just use a real example. You defeat Macros, you unlock the first Dreamstone, and that's the Ascended Solaris Dreamstone. So you know the end boss of that Dreamstone the second that you activate it. If you go into the Ascended Solaris Dreamstone, that's who you're fighting. However, before you can fight that final boss, you have to complete 3 rounds of the Dreamstone. And the rounds are randomly generated activities, missions, encounters with past mid-bosses and end bosses, right? So you might first start a Dreamstone and you'll be given 2 options. It says, go fight enemy A or go fight enemy B. And once you start those missions, there will be various activities that all accumulate to that final fight. And if you successfully complete a round in a Dreamstone, you'll be rewarded with bonus loot. You'll be given a temporary buff that lasts the duration of that Dreamstone, and you'll also learn more about the enhancements that make the final boss more powerful, right? These kind of modifiers. However, if you fail the round in the Dreamstone doesn't stop there. You keep moving forward in the rounds. However, you don't get that bonus loot, you don't get that intel, and you don't get that boon, making the final challenge all the more difficult, right? So the idea is you want to successfully complete these rounds to enhance yourself, to get that real roguelike experience. Every boon kind of feels like a new artifact that you're picking up that enhances your build in perhaps ways that you hadn't originally anticipated when you put your build together prior to the Dreamstone. Every Dreamstone will contain 3 rounds, so you'll go through these various activities, accumulating buffs, accumulating loot, which will all end in that final boss fight. And then if you successfully complete the boss battle, then you beat that Dreamstone and you unlock the next. And if you lose, you'll have to, unfortunately, do the Dreamstone again. And again, there are 18 of these in total. When we expect them to be completely replayable. The loot that drops is randomly generated, so there's a lot of really great stuff to chase in there. And the idea is, for the first 9 Dreamstones, we kind of call that the first act, and that's the first part of endgame, right? And that's to get the player to the max level 50. That's to make sure that their build is really ready for the end game, so to speak. So once you complete those first 9 Dreamstones, you're going to unlock the 10th Dreamstone, which will be part of the second act, which will be 9 more Dreamstones in total, as well as unlocking our second endgame loop, which is the Ascended Tower of Trials. Now, this is going to be similar to the Tower of Trials you play throughout the campaign and that you experience through various story beats. However, this essentially goes indefinitely. You keep climbing floors, you keep collecting buffs, and the idea behind Ascended Tower of Trials is this is the ultimate test of player skill. This is where you will be pushed to your limits. It's essentially indefinite scaling difficulty, and similar to Dreamstones, you're acquiring boons as you climb the various towers of the various levels of the tower. So your build is just getting enhanced the more you play. And the idea is, how far can I go with this? And to kind of put a cherry on top of that, there is unique loot that only drops in the Tower of Trials. So if you want to complete your armory, if you want to get that last legendary piece to kind of complete your set, you will need to grind Tower of Trials. And we kind of identified those weapons as chase items. We were like, these are what we think are some of the most compelling weapons in the game. These are what players are really going to want to, they're going to be proud when they acquire this. So we wanted that make that moment feel meaningful. And with the Tower of Trial being the ultimate test of skill, it was a match made in heaven.
Can I just say, the smile on my face when you talked about the lore justification for what a Dreamstone is, And the idea that it is linked to Cosmera and the continuing dreams and whatnot, that's absolutely fantastic. It feeds into some of the best lore in the entire game, I think, which of course is around the origin story of the world. So yeah, just really quickly, I gotta say, I absolutely love that. And the fact that that's tied into Endgame too, and it's a lore element that's doing, that's fantastic for introducing people to the story too, or the deeper story.
I love that resonates with you, and I know it's going to make Ming, our lore master and our lead writer, it's going to make him really happy to hear that, because that was something that was important to us throughout the entirety of Godfall's development, which was making sure that all of this makes sense. Obviously, at the end of the day, it is a game. It's going to feel gamey at times, but we wanted to create a universe that was compelling and true to kind of the original vision we had when we started this project. So I'm really glad that resonates.
Honestly, that tower stuff sounds so much fun, and the fact that we've been sort of fighting so many different enemies in there kind of goes back to sort of what Keith, you touched on earlier. You mentioned about there being about sort of 70 unique enemies in the game. Can you kind of give us any sort of insight into maybe a few different enemy types that maybe we haven't seen yet? Can you kind of tell us a little bit about some of those? I don't know, which ones excite you the most or something like that?
Oh man, so I would say that a lot of the mid-bosses that we have that aren't even the bosses, so we have quite a few large-scale bosses that you'll encounter in each of the realms, but we have over 10 different mid-bosses that you're going to encounter in the hunt missions, and each of them have their own abilities and traits and capabilities. So our team is very excited to see how players are going to face some of them. Some of them are very challenging, especially at the higher difficulties, and I look forward to getting a feedback and response around some of the mid-bosses as well.
Okay, I'm excited. Nothing is going to be a match for me and Armistice and my hammer. Let me add it. I'm going to run there, bump it on the head. Done. Job done.
I would say, just to kind of tack on to that, I think what is still largely what players can look forward to is learning about the various hierarchies within the tribes. We've really started to share. I think at this point, players have an idea of what the Abyssian look like, an idea of what the Vargals look like. We're starting to kind of show the Nyax as well. So you're starting to get a sense of what the tribes at a high level are going to look like. But then, as you experience each realm and really go from encounter to encounter, starting to kind of unlock those codex entries for each enemy, you really start to understand the hierarchy, and like Keith highlighted, the various mid-bosses that kind of dominate their tribe. And once you learn that, that's when I think the universe of Godfall really opens up, and you start to appreciate that variety that we try to instill in the game.
Okay, so clearly there's a lot of different enemies that you can fight. You've got, the 70 different enemy types, you've got tons of mid-game bosses, you've got tons of bosses that you will face at the higher level that are just massive in scale, but also you've got valor plates and all this different gear, weapons and skills that all combine together. And obviously this brings us to the point of a build. So what I really want to ask you guys is, what are some of your favorite builds? What's a valor plate, some skills, and some weapons that you love to just throw together into the mix and cause some carnage with?
Yeah, so for me, I'm going to go on the record as being consistent. You can go back to the original Hinterclaw reveal that we did on Eric's YouTube channel. It's still, to this date, one of my favorite builds has to be a Hinterclaw crit build. I like to focus on dual blades personally, but I would say there's definitely, I tried out the different weapon classes, and I think crit builds kind of work across the board. But I specifically like dual blades just because they're fast attacks, they're fast crits, it's very satisfying. I'll be honest, I haven't even done the min-max. I don't know if dual blades is technically the optimized weapon for this particular valor plate, but for me, the feel of combat with that is just out of this world. And furthermore, understanding the context of Hinterclaw as a valor plate and as an unlockable valor plate is important too, because Hinterclaw, unlike the other valor plates, or some of the other valor plates, has a very complex crafting recipe. So players really, unless you're really grinding some of the free roam and hunt missions early on, players are likely not going to be able to access this valor plate until endgame. The parallel that comes to mind for me is, if you remember like old school Smash, that feeling of unlocking Ness or unlocking Mewtwo, it was such a grind to get, and there's nothing inherently overpowered about Ness in the original Smash, but when you got it, it was like, oh, new play style, new opportunities, and I earned this, so it's so exciting. And Hinterclaw kind of gives me that same excitement. I get to the end of the campaign, I finally get the crafting materials, I can try the crit build, like yes, and then you go in the skill grid, you make sure all crit related stats are maxed out, you make sure that your augments and weapons are relatively in line, and just to tease it a little bit, Hinterclaw has one of the most unique augment constellations in the game. I don't want to share too much info because I don't want to spoil it, but it leads to a lot of potential build variety, and it's just fun I'm still experimenting with Hinterclaw to this day in our build, and it's just fun poking around and seeing what you can do with that. For me, as far as like how do I tinker with it, what variety do I look for? I like tying different elemental damages to the crit build. What is this like if I have more of an ignite focus and I'm trying to do fire damage versus a chill focus trying to do ice damage. So that's kind of like how I experiment with it, but overarching, that's like my favorite archetype in the game right now.
So for me, I've been exploring support builds recently. So I've been playing a lot more co-op, and I like to play Aegis Horn right now because there's several aspects to it. There's the Archon Fury attribute, which allows for global damage reduction across the board for your allies as you're playing. And also from a support perspective, I can drop down a bunch of battle banners that can heal. And with Aegis Horn, one thing that I really like is that there's many avenues to acquire Mark of Life Tap. And Mark of Life Tap is a way where I can apply a mark to an enemy, and whenever my allies defeat and kill that enemy, they get healed. So there's a lot of different ways that you can apply it through the augments and also through weapon traits, and it's been a really fun build where you can play both as a soft support as well as continue to tank. And I love to use the polearm, which is much more finesse oriented and focused on hitting weak points, which I love applying. And I just love the move set. I love the fact that our artists and animators decided to make the polearm much more thrust oriented, which you typically don't see in other games around polearms. And we really want to make the feel of that animation feel authentic as well as very accurate and precise.
Yeah, that does look really cool. I mean, I've seen a little bit of game. I mean, I haven't necessarily seen the healing build, but I've seen some gameplay of like Aegis Horn with the polearm, and it looks really, really nice in emotion. So there's definitely some interesting builds. I mean, you haven't convinced me to move away from Armistice just yet, but I like what you're talking about. But I mean, outside of like just the Valor plates, what if you can kind of sort of give us like a little bit of insight, what a couple of pieces of like just Godfall content in general that you're super excited, like on November 12th, where players can kind of jump in. What are you most excited to sort of see players touch first, basically?
You teed that up for me perfect, Eric, because I was actually going to poke fun of you and the Armistice gang, just ever so slightly with my answer, because I think what I'm personally most excited for is, I've mentioned this in past interviews, and I really want to bring this home for people. We wanted to create a playground. We wanted to give you a giant toolbox that you could load up with the tools that you want, that you find compelling, and play the way that you want it, and just enjoy that. And I love that. As we look at the socials, we look at comments, we look at what people are talking about, they're already theory crafting, even with just the information they have. I'm an Armistice main, I'm a Warhammer main, I'm this and that and this and that. But what's exciting to me is looking at Reddit, YouTube, Twitch, watching people play the game and seeing how they actually interact with builds and how they challenge their creativity once they get their hands on it. Because, for example, you've talked to me in the past that you want Armistice, you're big, bulky, you want hammer, you want tank, and all this other stuff. But I wonder in the back of my mind, well, hey man, what happens when you learn about how the AoE damage is applied from some of the weapon arts on the hammer, and you learn that scales off Spirit, and then you look at the Vertigo Valor plate, which specializes in Spirit in its augment constellation. Is it worth you giving it a chance to just load up on Spirit on a Vertigo Valor plate, for example, and trying the Warhammer there? You might think Armistice is the no-brainer, but if you like quote-unquote weird builds and you like experimenting, throw the Warhammer on Vertigo. You wouldn't think the Spirit Knowledge Valor plate would do great with Warhammers, but if the Warhammer has attacks that are scaling off of Spirit, maybe there's something there, maybe there's something to poke. And maybe it's not, maybe it's not the most optimized build, and that's exciting too. We're gonna see people create tier lists and believe what they think is the best and what they think is the worst. But I think there's gonna be some contention. I think it's going to be a larger discussion. I think there's going to be debate, and that's what I'm most excited for, just seeing how that takes shape upon release, and once everybody gets their hands on it, how they're going to explore and experiment. I mean, I think I speak for Keith and I. We've been waiting for that moment for 4 years, over 4 years at this point.
Okay, so obviously Godfall is coming to the PS5 and it's releasing on PC on the Epic Games Store on the 12th of November. Very excited for all of that, but in particular on PS5, can you guys talk about a little bit of the unique features behind the PS5 release? Because two things that I've heard a lot about. The first is haptics, with regards to the Godfall controller, and also the second one is loading times. I think it was about a week or maybe 2 weeks ago, we saw some video coming out of the PlayStation 5 channel, which showed that the respawn time in Godfall is something absurdly quick. It's like 3 seconds. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so back to the load times, that's one of the aspects of Godfall which we think is going to let players not just be in on the action and bringing them the action, but allow them to stay in the action as well. So whenever you get defeated, it reloads almost instantly, it doesn't break your momentum, and you get back right into playing. And that's the whole goal for us. And with haptics, just the fact that games are now much more believable and more immersive, and that haptics can contribute a lot to that in terms of the sensation of metal, as well as the aspects of being able to determine if an enemy is off screen, all the way to even knowing what weapon you've equipped the whole time without ever looking at the HUD. So all these aspects really contribute to better believability, attention to detail, and ultimately lets you get focused on the gameplay and the moment-to-moment combat.
Fair. Yeah, I mean that definitely sounds like really, really cool. I can't wait to feel what it feels like with that controller. Like I can picture in my mind what it might feel like to swing a hammer like that, but to actually kind of get the feedback is going to.
I mean, this is the controller here, so just so you guys can get a preview. I'm sure you guys all have it already. But yeah, it's got a nice it's got a nice weight to it. I really like the buttons. You guys all know it's got the little micro textures on here. This is still the early prototype, but it's got a good weight, it's a good feel. I think it's a really good move from where I've been playing the PS4 controller for a very long time as well. And we do have a quick turn button, so it's very close to the analog stick, so it's very easy for you to be able to do a 180 turn as well in the game.
All right, so obviously outside of that, I'm someone that loves playing the game co-op, right? So what is it that makes playing Godfall in co-op unique? And more importantly, when Bife messages me and he's like, "Yo, I'm stuck on this boss. I need you to help me." How am I going to jump in with him? How are we gonna team up together? And how do we play basically in co-op?
That doesn't sound right.
It definitely does. You want the big hammer to come and save you.
So let me answer the question on how you guys can play together first. So everyone has to play the early segment of the game, which we call it the tutorial, which is the first 45 minutes. And after you and your friends have completed it, you will then enter into your home base, which is called the Sanctum. So after that, you can just go onto the holo map, you can team up, and you guys can go and start playing. Now, the important point here is that you can play every single story mission together. You can play all the activities, such as our hunt missions and other endgame activities later on in the future together, and also custom game modes. But the important point here is that everyone has to have access to a specific story mission for you to be able to join. So for example, if Eric's is at the last chapter of the game and James just started, that James can't just accelerate all the way to the end of the game and then just finish the game in 30 minutes. So the key point here is you do have to have access to each other's missions, and that's one important point. Now, in terms of what makes co-op unique, we spent a lot of time thinking about synergies. So not only do you have battle banners that allow you to help and aid your other companions, but we have specific traits such as the Mark of Life tap and other attributes that allow you to be able to work together and synergize. And we're continuing to improve upon that level of gameplay for co-op in the future as well.
Nice, awesome. One more thing just to add on to that. You mentioned obviously progression is important. You need to kind of match progression if you want to do stuff further in the game. If we were to play through every single mission co-op, and like let's say I load into Bife's world and we're playing like in his instance, so to speak, if we both do the missions together, our progress is both checked off, right? So if I return to play on my own, the game will still remember that I've done those missions as well. Is that right?
That is correct.
Nice, good, awesome.
Okay, so following on from that when it comes to doing things cooperatively, but with a little bit of a twist when it comes to story things. Let's say that Arix is trying to read something in the lore, and he doesn't know exactly where to find that. First of all, where can he find it, as in pick it up in-game? And secondly, where can he read that in-game? Is it in the menus? Is it somewhere in the Sanctum that you can find? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so you'll undoubtedly priceless resource for Eric's as he tries to find all the various lore tidbits. So you'll be just as helpful to him as it will be vice versa. I assure you of that. But yes, we tried to scatter lore pieces really throughout the game. So first and foremost, I mean, really the central hub for your lore is the Codex, which can be accessed for the main menu, and you unlock Codex entries through a variety of means. For example, every enemy has a unique Codex entry that you unlock as soon as you defeat the enemy for the first time. So as you're going through the various realms, you're just unlocking those suckers rapid fire as you're encountering the various enemies and challenging them in that way. So there's already a hefty load of material there, but in addition, every piece of loot has a unique piece of lore entry that you're able to see from your armory. So what we tried to do, and we worked very closely with Ming on this, is just make sure that we're telling a compelling story both in the campaign where the player's primary focus will be, but also scatter pieces of world building throughout our various lore entries. So if somebody wanted to piece it all together and really wrap their mind around the world of Aperion and what our complete vision was, they would be able to access that through these various lore entries. And then finally, there are this idea of like codex fragments or lore fragments that you can find throughout the campaign and throughout your time playing, even into the endgame loop. And as you pick up these various fragment pieces, you're going to get, perhaps diary entries or other pieces of writing that will, again, just shed more light on the universe as a whole.
So just to nail down on something here, because this really excites me. There's a lore entry behind every single weapon in the game.
Yeah, that is correct. And they'll wow. Yeah, exactly. And they'll vary, right? So if you pick up a common sword early in the game, that common sword might not have a very compelling story attached to it, right? It's more of a grunt sword. But even that context is important. Why did a grunt use that sword? It is simpler, but that doesn't mean it lacks meaning. And then of course, as you find the more exquisite pieces, those are going to be a little bit more specific to the world. Those might have a very unique moment in the universe that they're tied to, whether it be a battle or an interaction or a relationship. There's just a lot of depth. We probably can't get into it all right now, but to give you a high level, that's the idea.
Plus, the lore fragments have a very specific point of view and perspective around how those journal entries are written. So you do also have to look at the perspective of the writer, and there could also even be room for interpretation around the lore fragments, because they come in the perspective of Orin as well as from macros and from other sources.
And of course they are bound, considering that they're opposed to each other, bound to have different views on the world and how this works. Which I say that now, we've already, lore series wise, I've already covered a whole bunch of that. So yeah, no, it's very much they're going to be at odds when it comes to their opinions on things. It's really good to see that that's a perspective thing that we're bringing to it.
It's been such an honor and pleasure to work with both of you guys. It's been a personal dream of mine to be able to, I've been watching all of your videos for many years, and having this opportunity to talk with you guys about Godfall is mind-blowing to me personally.
It has been, I feel like the word, it's been a privilege is very much something that applies here. I think this is also a decent point as well. I need to thank you guys again, because you are giving me an opportunity to plug something here, which is the fact that I am releasing a lore series on Godfall that is exclusive to my channel and is being done with the assistance of Counterplay Games and the lore master over there. And yeah, we're talking about all the different parts of the game that lead all the way up to the actual start of the game where the player jumps in. And the last episode of that, if this is releasing today on the 5th, you guys should be seeing that in a few hours live on my channel. And that last episode is going to be on the 1,000-year war between Orin and Macross. And you're going to understand how the two of them have really come to different opinions about the way that Aperion needs to be saved and how the world needs to go. So it's going to be a very interesting conclusion to the story before the story. So thank you very much for helping create that series. And yeah, I hope you guys really enjoy it.
I'm looking forward to seeing it as well. Like I want to learn more about the story, and learning that from you is going to be incredibly exciting. But again, thank you so much, Keith, and thank you so much, Dick, for joining us. I mean, it's always a pleasure to chat to you guys. Like I'm incredibly excited for the game, so having a chance to just sit here and geek out and just chat. I mean, I'd chat all day long, but I know you guys have got to get back to it. So, for those of you guys watching, hope you've enjoyed this. Don't forget, of course, Godfall launches on November the 12th on PS5 and PC. I'll also be spinning out plenty of videos as well. If you guys want more kind of guide-focused stuff, you want to know why Armistice is the best Valor plate, then come to me. You know, what can I say? But either way, for the time being, thank you so much for watching. Keep it locked here for plenty more stuff from Godfall.
Brother against brother. Macros tried to kill me. He failed. His reign ends with me.
You can count on us. You are strong, Orin, but not strong enough. You need to craft better weapons.
Go on, light the forge.
All you are unworthy of my master's new world.
When you defeat each of his lieutenants, their strength will become your own.
It's time for your madness to end, brother. I was never just your brother. I